Welcome back to Practical AutoCAD and Inventor and our Autodesk Inventor Certified User Exam Prep Series, your guide to mastering the essential skills and tools you need to confidently pass the certification exam. In this lesson, we'll be focusing on two key modeling features that show up on the exam, the Fillet and Chamfer commands. These tools help you apply smooth, rounded edges or sharp, beveled transitions to your 3D models, both for functional and aesthetic purposes. Knowing how to use them is crucial for real-world work design and will also be tested directly on the certification exam. Let's get started. Fillets are commonly placed on objects for various reasons, whether it be reduction of stress, handling, aesthetics, safety, whatever it happens to be. And it's basically a rounded transition between two surfaces. We're going to be looking at a few different types of fillets in here, but we're going to start off with this simple prismatic block that I have here in Inventor, just to kind of show you the basics here. To put a fillet on an object, we're going to go on the 3D Model tab up here at the top, make sure that we're on the Modify panel, and then we'll go to the Fillet tool right here. Now you'll notice that there are actually a few different fillet tools, and we'll look at each one of them in turn. But let's begin by looking at this first fillet right here. What it's going to do is it's going to allow us to specify a radius and then apply a rounded transition between two surfaces. So the default radius right here is now set to 0.125, an eighth of an inch, but you can simply make that whatever you want. For the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to make it 0.5, just a little bit bigger than what we have. And then what I can do is I can simply come up here and I can select the edges that I want to apply the fillet to. And you'll see what happens in Inventor as it goes through and it simulates that fillet radius for me. If I like that and I'm done, I can choose OK, and it applies the fillet to those to those corners. I'm going to undo this so that we can do it again. You don't have to only select parallel edges. You can come in and you can select all of your other edges as well. So I can select those, three edges there, and even this one here. And notice what happens is as I add more and more fillets, it starts to figure out what it can do for this corner to make the solution work. Again, let me walk through it. If I pick these two, it makes it round on the top corner, but it preserves this square corner on the outside. If I pick this one here, it makes this like a ball corner here, a bullnose corner, and then it's rounded on the other edges. But I'm not limited to only one radius. I can also come in and in this same fillet function, I can change to several different radii. So for example, let me start the command again. I'm going to say I want a fillet of a ½ inch on this one and a fillet of a ½ inch on this one. But if I want this one right here to have something larger, like maybe 1 inch, I can come over here and I can click on the plus right here, and I can add another radius of say 1 inch, and then I can pick another edge. And you'll see that this one now has a 1 inch radius, and then where these two had the ½ inch radius. Now if I want to go back and add more at ½ inch, I can simply just click on this one, where it says 2 edges, and I can come in and I can pick additional edges to have filleted at that radius. If I want to add another one at 1 inch, I can again just come in here and click here, and I can say add that one. Now if I've picked too many and I want to deselect some of these for whatever reason, you just hold Shift and come back in and click on the corner and it will deselect that one. And then you can go in and either add additional radii or pick a different radius or whatever it happens to be and add it back in. So that's the way you're going to use the regular fillet command. Now, in a moment, we're going to be looking at fillets on internal surfaces. We've only looked at the external surfaces. But before we move on to the next block, let's also look at this one here that is a full round fillet. What full round fillet will allow me to do is to pick 3 surfaces. And they don't, in this case, they're all parallel, but they don't all have to be parallel. I can pick 1, 2, and I can pick that bottom surface 3, and it will make a full round surface, filling that up so that it's tangent to all 3 surfaces. When I choose OK, then it's good to go. Another thing to note is coming back to the regular fillet command, you'll notice that it automatically chains your edges together. So if I were to come in here and pick this one edge, notice that it's going to say, hey, this line was tangent with this arc and that line. So it's going to automatically select all 3 of those rather than making me pick each one individually. Another thing that we can do with fillets is we can place internal fillets. So in this example here, we're going to be placing some internal fillets, but we're also going to look at what we call a face fillet. So in addition to the regular fillet command and the full round command, we have this face fillet command. One nice feature of the face fillet command is it will help fill in some maybe gaps and that kind of thing. So this part perhaps wasn't designed very well initially. You can see that there is a gap in between maybe this rib or whatever this is and the cylindrical surface here, and obviously that would create a design problem. However, by using that face fillet command, I can pick the 2 surfaces, like that surface there and that cylindrical surface there, and it will automatically create that fillet, but also fill in all of the surface back inside of there that needed to be filled in. And I'm not limited to whatever radius it chooses for me. I can come in and I can make it whatever size I want. So I could make it a 1/2 inch, or I could make it 2 inches, or whatever size I want. When I choose OK, it creates that face fillet between those 2, and then I would have to come back in here if I wanted to do that again and do the same thing on the other side. It won't allow me to string more than these together, and I can't change the radius and that kind of thing, but it is a great way to solve those problems. Now, the other type of fillet you can create in addition to outside corners is inside corners. So going back to the regular fillet command, I'm going to change my fillet radius on this one to say 1/4 inch. When I come in here and I pick my outside edges, you'll see that it gives me the ability to have that outside edge, so it's a round transition here. It would run out on this cylindrical surface, and I'll put one in there so that it does all of the calculations for the complete run out on that surface there. But if I were to do the same thing here, notice that it's going to put an inside surface fillet on that one line the whole way. And if I were to come in here, again, it will create all of the runouts that we would need for all of that as well. So if I choose OK here, notice now that it creates all of my fillets, it runs them all out to where they're tangent and makes everything nice and smooth. And again, just like always, I could come back in and add additional radii if necessary. One other command that's often found on the certification exam is the chamfer command. So we're going to add some chamfers in here. Whereas a fillet rounds off 2 surfaces, the chamfer command will create an angle between those 2 surfaces. Chamfer is also found on the 3D Model tab on the Modify panel, but right here next to fillet, it's chamfer. Now, one thing about chamfer is you can only do one chamfer distance at a time. Unlike fillet, where I can have several different fillets all stacked up in one feature, I'm limited to one size of fillet. Right now, the distance is set to 0.3125, but again, you can just vary that. I'll make it set to 1/4 inch for now. Now, there are 3 ways to do chamfers in Autodesk Inventor. There's the 2 distance method, where the 2 distances are the same, where in this case it would start from this corner, measure back the distance this direction, measure back the distance that direction, cut it off, and get rid of that outside corner. There's the distance and the angle, where I would select a face and it would measure from that corner back some distance and then allow us to cut it off at a different angle. And then there's the 2 distances option, where I can specify a different distance for one side and the other side. So I'm going to start off with just the regular distance option here. Notice that I can add the chamfers to outside edges like this, but I can also add them to inside edges like that. As I come in here and I put in more complex, you'll notice that it fillets, or it chamfers those two together. Okay, it does the same thing. And even if I add this one in here, it does all of the work to figure out what that chamfer should look like in both of those situations. If I choose OK, you'll see that it comes back in and it applies those chamfers so that it keeps it steady the entire way around. I'm going to undo that so that we can look at a couple other ways that this works. The second option here is the distance and angle. Notice that when I choose that option, it gives me the face and it gives me the angle. So I could say I want this to be chamfered at, say, 30 degrees, and I'll leave it at 1/4 of an inch. I'll choose my face first, and then I can choose my edge. And what it does is it says, okay, I'm going to measure from this corner back 1/4 of an inch, and then this angle right here is 30 degrees. If I change that to, say, 60, you'll see how it makes it now. This is 60 degrees. So it's starting from that corner, measuring back this direction, whatever your distance is, and then cutting that off at the angle. Now, because I picked this face first, if I come back in and I pick additional edges, it will come in and put those in. But notice that it does not allow me to pick that internal corner, because with this distance and angle method, it's just not available because of the way it works. If I wanted to do that one with different angles, I would have to come back in and put that in as a separate feature. Notice also that I can't select anything down here on any of these others because, again, they weren't originally involved in that first distance or my face for the angle. Now, the other way that chamfer works here is with two distances. So if I choose two distances here, notice I get distance 1 and distance 2. So I can say, okay, distance 1, I'll leave that at 1/4 of an inch. Distance 2, I'll make it 1 inch just to make it clear what I'm doing here. Notice that I have edges, so I can pick my edge. And in this case, it's measuring distance 1 down and distance 2 over here. But if I need those to switch for whatever reason, I can simply click this button and it will revert them to the other way. So now, again, as with the angle, anything that I pick up here, it's going to measure 1/4 inch on this one. So if I pick here, it's 1/4 of an inch here and here. And I could go all the way around and chamfer all of those edges if I wanted to all the way around. So it's making it 1/4 of an inch and then an inch down for all of those all the way around. Okay, I'm going to undo that. So there's lots of different ways to use the chamfer command. One other thing that we can do with chamfer, I'm going to go back to the distances version here, and I'm just going to pick a couple of edges just like this. So I've got those two in there. One other thing that you can do is you can do partial chamfers. Notice that there's a second tab here for partial. So I can click on partial. And now that I have, an edge in here that I want to chamfer, let's say I didn't want to chamfer the corner. So I only want to chamfer the outside edge maybe to here and the outside edge maybe to here, but not the corner here. I can say, okay, to start or to end, whichever I want. And then I can pick, and I'll just notice that it gets a little yellow dot on there. I can pick, and it actually, I chose to start or to end, but I can come back in and change that. And what I can do now is I can use these balls to change where that is. So if I pick this ball, let me change that to start. Notice that I can make it wherever I want it to go. So I can say I want to go all the way from the end to wherever this distance is, and it gives me the ability to come in here and change these distances so that I can move that away from that corner and say I only want that chamfer to go, a certain distance. And again, I can hold that still, so I can say, okay, my start distance here and my end distance, and you can kind of see what they are. It doesn't give you the ability to come in here and change this number, but you can change the chamfer distance. You just can't change the start and the end. So if I wanted that to be, if I wanted this one to be 1.5, I could type 1.5, and then this one, if I wanted it to be 5, I could type that in there, and notice that it will update those for me, and then just choose OK, and it does that. Oh, well, this whole length is 5, so that's why it did it the whole way. But this one was 1.5, so it gives you the opportunity. If I need to come back in and change that, I can just double click, and go back in here, and this one that I had made 5 inches, I could come in here and I could say let's make it back to 4, and notice that it is measuring from the end 4 inches over, so that I don't have that in there. So it's, again, it's all parametric. You can go back in and change it at any time. So I hope this is helpful and will get you through this portion of the certified user exam.